Welcome to our next in the edition of the Catholic Intellectual Tradition podcast. Our guest today is Lizzy Polishan, who is the author of A Little Book of Blooms, a book of poetry. So welcome, Lizzy.
Hello.
So Lizzy, can you begin by telling us about your education?
Sure. So I went to the University of Scranton for undergrad, and I studied English and philosophy. And then I went to the New School in New York for an MFA in fiction for one semester, and I dropped out of that.
So which classes were most influential to you when you were studying at the University of Scranton?
In terms of writing, or in terms of everything?
In terms of anything.
In terms of anything? Well, I had a class with you,
That's true.
which was a really good class about Platonism and truth and math, obviously, but that was a pretty cool class because it really informed how I think about the truth and big things like that. And then I also had phenomenology, which I think was, I mean, I really love phenomenology, so that was a big thing. Maybe like art and metaphysics. And I had this amazing seminar also with Dr. Whittaker on James Joyce. And that, like, I think about that all the time. That was also super helpful. So, yeah, probably those.
Okay.
There's a lot.
So as a writer, so now you're a writer and you've published this lovely book of poems, and you've also written some short stories and some other works. What writers most influenced you when you were reading them?
Oh, there's a lot. Well, definitely, I think James Joyce is phenomenal. He's really, really great. But I also, like, in terms of poetry, probably Gerard Manley Hopkins, he's a Jesuit poet. He's so fantastic. And just the stuff he does with language, like the textures of the words are so cool. The way he plays with sound, it's really something very special. So I like him a lot. I also like, there's this Sufi mystic poet named Rumi, who I really like, from, I don't know, maybe like the 12th century. I'm not really sure. I forget. But he's also really good. And he does this like bombastic, just like spiritual stuff about the universe and God. And yeah, so really influenced by him also. And yeah, I mean, there's more. But
So what about Hopkins particularly did you like? I mean, he certainly is known for his writing and his influence from the faith, right? I mean, he was definitely a Jesuit poet
yeah,
with a capital J. I mean, he was really influenced all of his poetry.
yeah.
Do you see your education influence you in the same way?
I think so. Well, I think the thing that Hopkins does that's really cool is like his poetry is very embodied. So it's very much like about God and worshipful, but it's also very textured and very much of the world also, and very situated in like the details of the material reality. And so in like the sounds of his poem, like in the earthiness of the poem, he even through that, like even when he's not directly talking about God, he's like worshiping through all of the sensory details. Does that make sense? And I think that that's like a Catholic thing to be wrapped up in that whole like incarnation
Yeah.
ideology.
So I agree. So what do you think? Why do you think, say, poetry is so powerful? In other words, if you say you read some Robert Frost poem, like you say you read the Two Roads Diverge in the Yellow Wood or something, and in those few lines he can encapsulate more than you can in say 50 pages of prose.
Right.
Right. I mean, more people would quote that poem than they would quote anything else. That, in other words, it moves people so much. What do you think it is about poetry that has the power to influence people so much?
Gosh, I don't know. I think well, probably that it is so short. I mean, people like short things, and so it's short, and so every word really matters. I mean, there's like a level of precision that you don't necessarily have with prose. Prose can be precise in other ways, but with a poem, every single word is doing like so many things all at the same time, and it also has this real, like, the sound of it is so important, and the cadence and the way, and I mean in prose that's obviously also important, but in poetry everything is so heightened, and so like every single image has to be super crisp, and every single word and sound it matters and is doing some type of lifting. So I think when you have something that's that short and putting so much meaning into such a small space, it's powerful.
So can
Yeah.
you say something about the power of words in general? I mean, in Catholic theology, of course, Christ is referred to as the Word, right? It's logos, and in the beginning was the Word. He was referred to as the Word. We have this almost deep philosophical interest in just the power of what it means for one person to communicate with another person,
Yes.
right?
Yes. No, yeah.
So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? I mean,
On the logos
on
and
anything like that.
on anything like that. I mean, yeah, I think that words are so, they really do. They have the power to convey your internal self and kind of turn that inside out. And also, I think like revelations of yourself to even yourself. Sometimes you don't know what you think until you put it into words. And when you're creating stuff, or like I think you're discovering parts of yourself and things that didn't exist necessarily in the world. Before that, and then being able to have a shared language, like a communal space, you're able to have like a communion with other people, a community with other people. So I think that that's really powerful. I mean, you're not just like locked in this little like flesh chamber prison of yourself that like I'm having all these thoughts and experiences and I can't get them to you. Like language is something that allows us to connect, which is really cool. And for me to like describe what I'm maybe experiencing, and then you're experiencing the same thing, and then people aren't so like trapped and isolated. Like you can find this common ground.
So I think that's a deeply Catholic viewpoint of communication, don't you think?
Yeah, I think. Can you elaborate on that?
I think Catholicism is a community religion. In other words, you're part of the body of Christ, is the way we would write it in classical Catholic theology.
Yeah.
That you're not isolated. That it's vital for you to express yourself to the other. Right? You're not in simple isolation. You're part of a larger communion.
Yeah.
Where you don't lose your individuality, but you're part of something much greater.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think the way to be part of that is to communicate, like you just were saying, that you're communicating the self.
Yeah.
Right? What you are is communicating not just your thoughts and ideas, but your very being to another person.
Yeah. And that shared being, like, I don't know, like you could call it a soul or whatever you want to call it. I mean, obviously in Catholicism it would be a soul, but that thing that everybody has and that connects everybody, and using language to be not isolated. Yeah, you said that so well.
Oh.
Yeah. Very nice.
So here's what I want you to do now. I want you to
gosh.
read one of your poems from your excellent book.
Oh no. You didn't tell me this was happening.
Yeah, tough luck. Here's my favorite poem of your book. So you're going to read it and we're going to discuss
I think
this
I know
poem.
which one it is because you always post it on Facebook.
Go ahead.
Oh, it is. All right, I know.
Okay.
It's called, Canna Pretoria. There are more things to do to butterflies than catch them. There are more things to do to mountains than climb them. There are more things to do to caves than mine them. There are more things to do to beautiful things than buy them.
All right, so what do you see as the... I don't want to just you to simplify your poem, but what do you see as the inspiration for that poem, or what gave you the idea for that poem?
Well, I know Heidegger is kind of taboo, but I think that poem in particular is very Heideggerian. So in Heidegger, you get this idea that there is inherent truth in being, but there's a multiplicity of modes of truth. Like one thing doesn't necessarily have to mean one thing, and everything can't just be reduced down to one thing. So there's so truth exists, but there's many truths. So like you could look at a book or something and everybody could take something different out of it, and it presents itself to you in different ways at different times, and there's so many different ways for the world to be. But I think in America in particular, I think a lot of the time things get kind of reduced down to their monetary value, or like with women, I think a lot of the times you get reduced to your body or like your sexual value or something like that. So just a poem that's resistance to the reduction of being to one mode of being. But I guess that's just one interpretation.
I see that as I think there's a desire in human beings when they see something they like, mm-hmm. or something that then they want to possess it, as this somehow that's going to increase their self-value, when it really doesn't. It ends up ruining it.
Yes.
Right? I mean, sure, you might like a butterfly, you catch it and you kill it, and then the butterfly is no more. Right? Yeah. Somebody sees a painting and they like it, maybe they want to buy it, but does it really make you appreciate the painting more if you hang it in your room and don't let anybody see it?
Right.
Right? I mean, to me, what the poem is saying is you shouldn't remove these things from the shared experience to just possess them on your own,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, I completely agree with that. That's like the other part of it too. Yeah, I think even like Heidegger, I think says that. He says like people, they just like stockpile everything, and so everything is about like hoarding things and not necessarily using them in the world and like having fun with that. It's like it's just about owning things, and it's like you could have this giant collection of records, but if you never listen to them, like do you really have them?
Yeah.
Stuff like that, and yeah.
So I think that's
It's
very, very much in Aquinas' thought,
Yeah.
where Aquinas talks about the proper use of things.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're supposed to use the things in the proper way. So the thing itself is not evil or good. It's in how you use this. Right.
Yeah, he does say that.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, very nice.
I'm glad you remember all of your
Theological
early education.
studies.
Okay, so here's the next one I'd like you to read. This one on 107. Could you read this one?
Sure. Jacob's Ladder. When you can look up into the clouds and through the clouds see nothing, but know what lives up there already dwells in the silence of your heart, then the ladder will appear. Praise every blister, every rung, every breath, every inch of the joyful climb. The climb is the work is love made visible. The love is the link between you and all you could be, all you want and all you could ever have.
And so what was your inspiration for this poem? It's not Heidegger.
No, definitely not. I guess, well, God, I would say, and maybe kind of, I think definitely like more of a Platonic conception of God. So in the dialogue in Plato's Phaedrus, and I think in the Symposium too, like love is the thing that connects you in the material world up to the world of the forms. And so like in the Phaedrus, they're sitting, like you'll be in the world and then you see the beautiful boy and then you're like, wow, that boy is so beautiful, and then you're moved to the ultimate form of beauty, like up in the forms, and you're connected to this thing that's greater than you and bigger than you. And I really do think that that's how things work in the world. Like you see beautiful things in the world and you have an experience where you get genuinely moved by something. It could be like a person or a piece of art or anything that you find beautiful being outside, something like that, and it just hits you, and it's this very material embodied thing of the world, but then through that experience you experience this like love and wonder and awe, and it's something that's within yourself. I mean, you're awakening to something that's in yourself, but it's also outside of yourself, and then you're connected, and it's really beautiful. Yeah,
I think that goes back to what you said earlier. This is a communication of the self.
Yeah.
Right. What you're talking about is a communication of the self. So could you explain why you called it Jacob's Ladder?
Yeah. Well, okay, so every poem, well, all of the poems are based on different flowers. And so Jacob's Ladder is, the ladder is connecting you from the material world up to the world of the heavens. But, yeah, it would be a ladder from the material to the...
And so that's also an
other
imagery
world.
used extensively in Catholic philosophy and theology,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
You're talking about the ladder of divine ascent,
Yeah.
and what draws you away from the ladder, or what tries to pull you down. If you know the icon I'm talking about, where people are trying to walk up the ladder, and demons are trying to pull you down off the ladder, right?
No, yeah.
So I mean, the poem to me is saying to what you need to do to move up the ladder, right? What draws you up the ladder?
Yes. Yeah.
Towards the beautiful, towards the true, towards love.
Yes.
Right, and away from catching butterflies and mining rocks and things like that.
Yes.
Let's try another one here.
Okay.
Okay, how about this one on 125?
Okay. Lily 2. It's not about you, but how the space around you moves and flutters and bends when you walk into a room, disruptor and shaper of nothing. Praise be to God for the nothing, for the air outside you that defines you, that makes it possible for you to be anything or anything else or anything at all. The air outside you that you can take up and hold inside your lungs before you turn it back into breath, into the air I will take up, move through, disrupt, into the nothing that defines me too.
So there's almost like a Buddhist idea in this poem,
Yeah.
right? When you say praise be to God for the nothing, and the nothing is capitalized, everything is in capital letters,
Yeah.
right? And for the air that defines you. So what was your inspiration here in this poem? what were you thinking when you wrote this poem?
Well, I think the nothing is something, you know, and the nothing, I mean, the nothing, because it's full of possibilities, it's full of everything that could be, you know, and so, but it's also this shared space because it hasn't happened yet, and so it's something, I mean, we're surrounded by nothing, right? So it, like, in this nothing that we're both in, we can both create something that's new that we're both, it's like a shared communication kind of.
So
Does that make
it's
sense?
a possibility, you're saying.
Yeah, the possibility for, I mean, for extending yourself, so like, again, creating selfhood, but then also sharing that self and entering into a community with other people and their selves and their possibilities that they're incarnating and creating, and so like things that haven't happened yet but that could still be a part of your self, like a part of the projection of yourself, basically. Does that make sense?
So again, I think it's a deeply Catholic philosophy there.
Yeah.
Right. I think the theme of many of the poems in this book is a connection to the good in the world. Right.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't go so far as to say a rejection of the bad, but to, I would say, recognizing what things could draw you away from the good. Right. Trying to possess wealth, trying to this kind of thing, instead of appreciating the beauty. Right. So. I think that the theme of many of these poems is how do you get closer to this Platonic ideal and recognize yourself as complete yourself as a human being.
Yeah, and in conjunction, I think, with other people. So like, how do you exist as a person in the
Again,
world?
also very
Yeah.
Catholic, right?
Yeah.
You're not. I mean, there are some religions where it just matters about you, right?
Yeah.
But in Catholicism, it's not like that. When we pray, we say we say, we pray as a community, right?
Yes.
You can't just sit at home and do all your prayers. You're supposed to come to Mass and say prayers together, right? As a community, there's always a community aspect of Catholicism,
Yes.
which not every religion has, right? So we were compelled to be part of a community,
Yes.
right? And to
Yeah.
see other and to interact with other people, communicate with other people,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. And to see the God in other people, like
Yeah.
other people as God, not just worshiping like God in the sky, but the God around you in the world and in.
Well, seeing individuals as
people.
the image of God on earth,
Yes, yeah.
right?
For sure. I think, and what you just said too also reminded me, there's this really beautiful thing I just read recently by Bell Hooks. She was talking about how people are so focused on self-improvement all the time, but not necessarily on extending love in the context of a community. I'm pretty sure that was the phrase she used, and I thought that was so like beautiful and powerful and important, because that is such an important part of existing in the world. And like, you could do all of these things, to make yourself better physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Even that's like kind of a Jesuit thing, that. But if you're not doing the other part of it, which would be the men and women for others part of it, and the being with other people and appreciating them, like, what are you doing? Where's the love? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on?
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
If you're elevating the self over what your true nature is, so if you forget about the men and women for others and just focus on the other aspect, it's you're not really fulfilling what you should be as a human being, right? In other words, you can make yourself strong and fit and mentally strong and learn as much as you can, but without being for other people, right? You only have half the coin.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
I thought that was a good thing. Definitely changed how I was thinking about myself and my self-improvement. So yeah.
That's implicit in your poetry.
Oh, thanks, Steven.
Can you? This is impossible to show on the radio here, or podcast, whatever we're calling this.
Yeah.
But there's a distinct geometry to all of your writing too, in the sense that you don't just let the words sit on the page. There's spacing and there's pictures, and it's hard to explain without showing it. But you might have one word large and another word small, and you might have the words falling off a cliff. And
yeah.
And what are you hoping to say with that kind of geometry, with that kind of imagery in the poem?
Yeah, so that's a really important part, I think, of the book and of all of the poems. So it is hard to just read them because the way that they're on the page is important. So I guess just that the embodiment of the actual words is important in the way that it's laid out, like the way that they're incarnate in the world. And I mean, like, not to bring it back to Heidegger, but he has this idea also of like the earth and the world, right? And so the world is like the context and the meaning and like the word, the logos, and then the earth is like the incarnation and like the textures and like the phrase that you always use, the smells and the bells. Like the actual like embodied material. And he says that both of them, well, creativity kind of comes from like the wrestling between the two of them, and they're both super, super important in creation. And I think that a lot of the time in the art world, but particularly in poetry, I do think that the logos and the world part of it is, elevated over the earth part of it. But I think that the earth part of it is very important. And I think even in Catholicism, like the word is so important, but like the word became flesh and incarnate and embodied. And like, so that embodiment and like that God coming down and not being cordoned off from the material world, like not being separated, entering the world and the community and becoming flesh is really, really important. So that was definitely intentional. And yeah.
Well, I don't think you could have a more Catholic statement than the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I mean, that's pretty much the whole thing in one sentence, right? I mean, that's the in the same way that you're saying about communicating with other people, the Word becoming flesh is God communicating with us. Right?
Yeah.
God does not want to be aloof from us either.
Right.
He wants to interact and be part of our community, right? He wants to interact with human beings.
Yes.
He doesn't want to stay in his, lofty chamber and ignore us.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely so. That's why the incarnation obviously is the fundamental aspect of Catholic theology.
Yeah.
So you're saying you're mimicking that in your poetry.
Yeah, look at that.
And how about the next poem? Could you read the one here on 37?
Sure. So this is called, I think this one is called Roses, but I didn't. Yeah, okay. Not trees in fall unleaving, or springtime buds receiving rain. Not joy and sadness, not imagination, not memory, nothing that comes and goes. What we want, we already have. The silent presence behind all seasons. Oh, okay, I know you're going to ask me where that came from, and that one actually was explicitly Catholic. I was definitely thinking about Ecclesiastes. There's like a time for everything, and so throughout the becoming, throughout the passing, throughout, things changing and unfolding and becoming different, there's always like a being behind them, like God, and there's always this stability, like the being is always there behind, in the becoming. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Ecclesiastes was your influence there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Loose Ecclesiastes.
Loose Ecclesiastes.
But yeah, I love Ecclesiastes.
But I think, to me, one of the beauties of Catholic theology and philosophy, and this isn't true in all other religions, is that Catholicism embraces the whole world. In other words, Catholicism embraces music, it embraces art, it embraces poetry, it embraces literature. It doesn't have a negative view of the world. It has a positive view of the world. And as such, like Hopkins, for instance, or Thomas Merton, right? They're clerics who write poetry, right? Even if you'd have the daily office, which all the priests say every day, at the end there's a whole collection of poems, right? So there's all aspects of creation are to be studied and enjoyed in the proper way, right? Which many religions would say reject poetry or music. Some religions definitely reject music as coming from a bad place, but Catholicism embraces it. It embraces all of God's creation.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, which I think is so beautiful, and yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, very cool.
So the book is dedicated to your mom.
Oh, yeah.
And do you want to say something about that?
Oh, I love my mom. I guess, when I was actually writing this book, it was during the pandemic. So everything was like locked down, except for this one little flower store next to our house. For some reason, it was an essential business. I don't know why, but it was. I think because they had vegetables. So like food, I guess, was essential. So anyways, we were all locked in my house. And then at some point, my husband and my mom's husband went back to work, so it was just me and my mom. And so my mom and I would go to this like flower store every day, and she was building this beautiful garden while I was like making this book, these poems about this garden. And I love my mom. I always wanted to do a book for her, but also, so as I was writing, I was like looking at my mom making this garden, and then I was also thinking about creation and creativity as I think that it is so close and similar to motherhood metaphorically, right? So the creation of the universe, and then also artistic creation, and also motherhood, like just being basically the same thing. They all kind of have this same form. And so a lot of the poems are ending up being about mothers anyways. And that, you know, form of creation and creativity. So then, like, thinking about my own mom and how she is just integrating that. And my mom is also an artist too. So I mean, she was making her garden. That was her art at that moment, which was like a very temporal thing, but she's also a painter. So she really is like this whole, I mean, she didn't create the universe, but like insofar as she has a soul that's part of God who did create the universe, I guess she did. But like she, yeah, just being like the mother artist, universe creator figure, putting all three of those together.
So with respect to that, do you find writing to be a spiritual exercise?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes, I think so. Poetry for sure can be spiritual. I think this book in particular was something spiritual for me. I mean, like I was doing it, part of it was so that I wasn't going crazy from the pandemic. And I mean, sometimes I think that writing is not spiritual. Like I know I write other stuff that's not poetry. I write fiction, and that usually doesn't feel spiritual. I'm usually just like cursing at the computer because I'm angry because it's hard and it's long. But I think poetry often feels inspired, because I think with poems they more so like happen to you. Like I'll just be sitting somewhere and then I'll like have a poem and it feels like it's coming from something beyond, or like you can look at something really beautiful in the world and then be inspired, just like kind of what I did in this book, and then you're like connecting to God through that. So I do think that poetry in particular is spiritual, but not all writing.
That's interesting. You say that. I wouldn't have guessed that poetry was somehow more of a spiritual exercise than writing something else.
Yeah. Well, just for, I'm just talking about myself personally, like my experience. Like for other people, I'm sure it's different, but like that's how it usually is for me.
I find that, well, I mean, I'm not a poet or a writer in any sense, but the poems that I've written, they were all comedic and very silly, right? Every single line of it was just, it was meant to be a joke. I find it too difficult to pour out honest emotion into a poem. It doesn't feel right. But I can find a spiritual exercise in writing prose where I could really just talk about ideas.
Right.
But I don't have the skills, maybe I don't have the honest emotion or the insight to write a poem that is serious.
Well, no, but you just said you're doing that with prose, so maybe we're just the opposite. Like, we favor different forms. And we are opposite, so well, that would make sense.
Because, I mean, I'm very comfortable talking about my ideas, but not myself. So and the more abstract the idea, the more comfortable I am of talking about it.
Yeah.
Do you know? So I think that's easier done in prose, perhaps, than it is in poetry. Poetry almost forces you to expose yourself. Right, expose your inner thoughts, your inner workings, that maybe you don't have to do writing philosophically in prose.
So, like an underlying vulnerability.
Yeah.
In poetry, I mean, that's interesting.
Unless you're just writing a comic poem,
right?
Just,
Yeah. No, I think. I mean, well, I've definitely written poems that are more vulnerable, and those don't always feel necessarily more spiritual. But I didn't feel like super vulnerable writing these in the way that I mean, I didn't, because maybe this was more about ideas, and I knew it was about, creativity and creation and motherhood and God and like all of that stuff. It wasn't me, like I'm not telling you my life story or anything in there, so I wasn't.
If we read all of your poems, we don't know anything more about your story,
right?
We just sort of know more about you as a person, what your thoughts are,
right, as a thinker, which is what I think you were saying maybe about the prose that you were using as a spiritual exercise. It was about the ideas.
So why do you find that your prose is so different from your poetry? I've read your prose too, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
Many of which I like, some of which I didn't like as much. I still liked it all, But I think definitely your prose feels different than your poetry.
Yeah. I think, well, with prose, so a lot of the time when I'm writing prose, it's not me. I mean, it's character driven, it's different people. So that automatically is like an investigation into a different person. I don't know.
So does that feel more comfortable because you're exposing the person and not yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the vulnerability for me isn't necessarily linked to the form. I really don't know why I don't feel that prose is as spiritual. You know what? I will say though there is one thing that I wrote prose, and it's actually the thing that you like, and that did feel kind of spiritual, and it did feel like it was kind of coming from somewhere beyond myself, somewhere like forcing it. I think with prose too, maybe it's just more structured and there's so much of it and there's so many things you have to be thinking about and there's just so many words. Like it just feels more maybe mundane to me. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Maybe you're more interested in the story and the development of the character.
And than the ideas.
The ideas could be lost.
Yeah, I think I lose the ideas in prose. So, which is a fault of me, not of the genre itself. But it does get exciting when I think you have revelations and you like discover stuff in your prose. Like in that one story, I think I actually like discovered some cool stuff, so that's why.
Yeah, that's why I like that story so much.
And that's probably why it felt more in tune.
But I mean, if we look at, let's go back to your influences. If we look at, say, James Joyce's writing, the ideas are clearly there, right? That his ideas are pouring out. However, most people don't like to read James Joyce because it's just so incredibly difficult to read.
Too much ideas.
Right, yeah. It's because it's so dense. I mean, James Joyce is never going to sell as much as Agatha Christie, right?
Right.
Agatha Christie sells I think she's the most popular author of all time.
Yeah.
She sold more than anybody else.
Yeah, she's up there.
And I really enjoy her books. I love Agatha Christie. But you don't walk away from an Agatha Christie saying, oh, there was a deep philosophical point. You walk away saying that was a really interesting story, right? It's story. And even her characters, she doesn't really develop the characters as much, but the story is always so interesting you can't put it down.
Right.
Other writing where they really develop the characters and maybe the story isn't so interesting, but you're still interested in reading it. I mean, with Joyce, it's like working through a mathematical proof, right?
Well, in Ulysses, yeah.
Right, yeah, well...
Yeah.
No, even in the other things, even in the short stories and things, you don't feel like, say in Dubliners, right? You don't think, oh yeah, that's a character I know, right? That reminds me of so and so. Like all the characters.
I think you do sometimes.
To me, the characters are so different that I understand what he's doing and I appreciate the genius of his work, right? And it's just flowing. I mean, you could take a 10-page James Joyce short story and teach a class on it. Right, I mean, of course, a semester, right? Because every line is dense and everything is deep.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that people actually like to read it. Some people certainly do, but it's not say popular fiction, right? More people read Hemingway, let's say.
Right.
Hemingway's writing is simple and straightforward, and I don't want to criticize Hemingway. I mean, he won the Nobel Prize for literature, I think, but it's much, much different. Right, Hemingway, you know the point that he's making on page 1, right? He's not, it's not an enormous philosophical point, but he's telling a really good story, right? And for many people, especially young men, they read the story and think, yeah, I want to go out and be this. I want to do this, right? Right. We don't read a James Joyce story and say, yeah, I want to be one of these characters, right? I don't think so.
I don't know. I think, with Hemingway, I think he's definitely blending, like, the high and the low culture, because I do think that he's doing cool philosophical stuff, even if he says he's not. I mean, it's
I think he definitely is.
I think he definitely is, but I think he also has this surface that's
But it's not as dense. It's not as dense as Joyce, yeah.
It's accessible from a surface level to the vast majority of people, whereas, like, maybe James Joyce doesn't feel that way, but I think that...
Maybe Joyce appeals to 1 out of 10, where Hemingway appeals to 9 out of 10.
People, right?
But
it's still the blend. Like, I think at the end of the day, like, particularly in Dubliners, but then also with and then with Hemingway, I think that they're both at least trying to blend, like, the high and the low. So, like, the high philosophy with the embodied, like, putting it in the form of a story and not like a philosophical proof. Does that make sense? And so having that blend.
Well, I think cool. Joyce said that he was living in Paris, right?
Yeah.
And he said that if he was living in Ireland, he would just go to the pub every night and tell his stories, and it would be exercised from him, and he wouldn't write.
Yeah.
That the fact that he was in Paris was what forced him to write, because he wasn't exercising this of going to a pub and telling it the story. So he needed to tell a story, right? So if you're able to tell it to somebody, down at the local pub or something in Dublin, is different than having to if he's in Paris, he doesn't have that option, so he's forced to write it. So in other words, he's sort of like exercising a demon of himself by forcing to write.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that it's inside you, you have to let it come out somehow. But if it comes out easily, right, then you're not going to do the writing.
Right, you're just going to tell
you're just going to tell the stories, and which, I mean, I think oral storytelling is incredibly important, and I think we've lost that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, for sure.
but for sure, I would like the written word better because it's more lasting, right? Somebody is a great oral storyteller. It disappears when they disappear.
Right.
Where the James Joyce is long dead, but his books are still out there,
Yeah.
tormenting students and filling
Never dying.
PhD theses all over the place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know if, say, I think in the same way, I think Hemingway had to tell his stories, right? When
Right.
Hemingway was doing some kind of adventure in his life, in the back of his mind is always, yeah, this is a story, and I want to tell this story, right?
Right.
Whether he's in a war or he's climbing a mountain or something, other highly manly activities, he was thinking in the back of his mind, this is a story, and I want to tell this story, right?
Yes.
Even if he's going out and having a coffee at a cafe, he's still thinking of this as a story.
Yes.
Like I really like Hemingway's Clean, Well-Lighted Place, one of his short stories. And it's really just about, a little cafe where people are drinking coffee, right? But he could see there's something more to it. Like he's always seeing a story.
Right.
Right. But I'm not necessarily, I mean, there's definitely a philosophy behind it.
Right. Well, isn't that the one where the guy dies? I might be thinking of a different one.
I think you're thinking of a different one.
But he cut out the part where the guy dies.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, he also had that iceberg theory, right? Where he would write a really long story and then he'd cut off the beginning and the end and he would just give you the middle. And then, so you were getting this very condensed. I mean, so there was a lot more going on than what you were actually seeing as a reader. But I think the fact that he did all the work of creating the other parts of the story, it really situates the one little part that you get and it makes it so much stronger. Which is kind of cool. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: as a woman, when you read Hemingway, is there anything about him that turns you off?
Well, I mean, he's so yeah, he's.
I mean, there absolutely is an idea of women as conquest in a lot of his stories.
I was gonna say his female characters aren't always the best. They're kind of just there, and they're not great. But I will say about Hemingway that so I'm a very feminine person and I like femininity and I'm drawn to I mean obviously there's a pregnant woman on my book I'm very into that whole feminine vibe, so and I think I'm not really into the whole machismo thing, I'm not really into guys that are into that whole thing, but I do think that Hemingway does a really good job of romanticizing the masculinity and machismo and all of his adventures and stuff like that in such a way that it makes it appealing. It makes me, this hyper feminine person, kind of intrigued in a way by it. So I do think that that's actually cool because you can tell he really loves what he's doing in that way. I guess in the same way that I love femininity and all of that. Mm-hmm. You can just tell, I think, how much he loves that whole.
But he sees the romantic aspect of this.
Yeah, in a really beautiful way. I think he renders it very beautifully.
So if he's riding a motorcycle down some back alley, he's still thinking of this in a romantic view. He's not just thinking I'm getting from point A to point B. This is something exciting. Right? There's something exciting about being alive.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But all of his writing, I think, is highly masculine.
Oh yeah.
And I think he, again, I think the female characters are not that strong in his books.
Yeah.
There's very rarely a female character that you think, oh wow, that's really she's really central to the story.
Right.
They're almost more as conquests, I think.
Yeah.
They're admired for their beauty. He certainly admired women for their beauty and was interested in women, but I don't know if he ever developed a deeper philosophical view towards that.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with you there. I do think it's interesting because, I think all of his characters, in the sparseness of his writing, you're getting all of his characters are kind of pared down, but particularly the women. It's with the men, you feel there's these rich lives behind them, and then with the women, it's you kind of feel he's not necessarily inventing that in the same way. So I mean, sometimes I feel like that, but I do really. But
I still like his writing, and I like
his.
Have you ever read Irish author Maeve Binchy? Have you ever read her?
What did she write?
She wrote a lot of very popular books in, say, the past, I don't know, very recently. But if you said to me, is she a great writer? I'd say probably no.
Yeah.
Is she like a Joyce or something like this? No. But I absolutely love reading her books because I would say that she's in the tradition of sort of, especially Irish oral storytelling.
Oh, I love that.
When you read it, it's a story.
Yeah.
Right? She's telling you a story.
Yeah.
and the characters are very interesting, and the story is very interesting, and it all weaves together. So I really like her writing, and that's what I would say. I think her writing is much more feminine, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was mostly read by women, but I really read a lot of it. In fact, once I was buying one of her books at a bookstore, and the person checking me out asked me if I was buying it for my wife. I said, "No, I'm buying it for me. I could read this too."
You could read it too, yeah. Reclaim Da Vinci.
But I liked the style of her writing, right?
Yeah.
There was no, it wasn't a big philosophical point again, but it was the style that really, I really really enjoyed the style.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like sitting around in a living room at night and having somebody tell you just a really great story, somebody who can really tell a story.
Yeah.
And develop, and in her writing, the characters are very interesting, and that you could see that she really has interest in the characters. She wants to know their backstory.
Yeah.
She wants to know everything about it. In the same way that if you read Tolstoy, right, in War and Peace, he takes 10 pages out and just explains to you the backstory of this farmer who just is chopping down the hay. So you have 10 pages of his backstory, and
And the side character.
yeah. I mean, just
crazy.
There's more characters in that book than any other book, I think.
There's so many characters.
And every one is drawn out, right? So it's not like the men, the women, everything. I think Tolstoy definitely understood that you have to develop each and every character, right?
Yeah.
But he wrote very, very long novels.
Yeah.
Right? Very, very long. And he wrote some short stories, but I love Tolstoy's writing.
Yeah. I think that's also similar. So there's a contemporary writer. You just made me think of her. Do you know who Elena Ferrante is?
No.
She wrote these books, and it's the Neapolitan novels, I think is the name of them. It's a series, and it's a super, super long series. And the first one is My Brilliant Friend. That's like the really famous one. But so it's the same way. It's like every single character gets a lot of description and everything. But her big thing is that... But I wasn't annoyed by it. Like, I loved it. I just felt so immersed in this world and in this city. And she is working kind of from a philosophical point of view. So her belief, I guess, is that identity is, I don't want to say it wrong, but I think, basically that it's contextual, and, who you are in conjunction with other people forms your identity. She has this really cool philosophy, but, it's not... it doesn't detract from the book. And I think when the books first came out, people were saying, oh, this is just chick lit. And then people read it and they were like, wait, this isn't chick lit at all. This is amazing. And the town just it really, really comes to life. It's really cool. So I feel like you would really like it. But yeah, I feel like that's Tolstoy, but woman Tolstoy. Woman Tolstoy. in the best way. So no, yeah.
See, when I think of, say, in terms of the Russians, like Dostoevsky, he seems to be more like Joyce. That I read his characters and I think, I don't know anybody like this, right? This is,
And you know a lot of people.
I
was going to say, maybe you don't
I know a lot
get
of
out
people,
much, but
I know
everyone.
a lot of people from all over the world. I have friends on every continent. But, I Tolstoy, every character speaks to me.
Yeah.
Right? And Dostoevsky, no character speaks to me. The same way that Joyce, I just think, they just all seem strange.
You don't think that Evelyn or Molly Bloom speaks to you?
Now I feel like you're making an accusation.
No. Maybe, I think me and my mom, have talked about this, particularly Evelyn, extensively, because my mom, I think, was also very, moved by that short story, and just, it's this young girl who's kind of, I think she has the opportunity to leave Ireland, and then she ends up staying, and it's, on her own volition. She just feels kind of paralyzed and stuck, and... She's so just the feeling of being paralyzed, having a way out, nobody's forcing you to be there, but you feel stuck and trapped. And I think we both in your hometown. So I don't know, maybe it's an Irish thing, but we both we're oh no, we can relate to that. And then I guess just Molly Bloom being so Molly and just bombastic and off the body, and so this mother figure, but then also not a mother, but the mother figure, and then also very embodied and sometimes kind of gross and
So James Joyce just speaks better to you than to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it might just be that. I think, but yeah.
So how about when you're writing poetry? Are you worried about, say, developing the story, or there's not necessarily a story but a point? Do you start off with the point, or you think of the words? You think of the because a poem is more like a song, right? It's supposed to. There's something about the music of the poem that's going to be attractive, right?
Yes.
It's a poem. I feel very strong about this. I think poetry should be read aloud, and people don't want to do that because nobody wants to read aloud to themselves. But I think poetry in its proper state should be someone reading a poem to a group of people.
Yeah.
Right, that there's supposed to be a musicality to the sound, right? That's the whole point of a poem.
Yeah.
Right. So do you find yourself you're thinking of that first, or you're thinking of the point you want to make first? You're thinking of the philosophy, or you're thinking of the flow of the words?
No, I'm not thinking of the point. I'm usually thinking of the words. Well, I think it's different because I think in terms of this book, I kind of knew what I was doing with it, and I knew that there were like certain themes that I was working with, so that was always on my mind, like in the background of my mind, but I didn't necessarily, starting a poem, I didn't have a specific point. I just knew like I was working with the nothing, I was working with embodiment, I was working with choice, I was working with love. Like I was with all of those things configured in specific ways. So in terms of the context of that book and that collection, I did have those ideas, but I think a lot of the times when I'm writing poems, like I'll start with stuff that it might be, well, either I just get hit with a whole poem all at once, kind of like inspired, and then that feels kind of more like it's happening to you. But I also, like, I really do like words and the way they sound and phrases, and I love, like, putting words together in cool ways. And so even if it's, like, nonsense phrases, like, you kind of make those and you put them together, and then they end up, like, the sense kind of fills in around it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think, but no, I think that the way that the words sound.
So what kind of things did you read when you were a really small child? Did you read Dr. Seuss and things like this?
No, I hated Dr. Seuss.
Really?
Yeah, I really didn't like him. I know that's unpopular opinion.
Why? I love Dr. Seuss.
I don't know. My mom said she thinks it's a boy thing because my mom also hated Dr. Seuss, but my brothers loved him. I don't know. I really didn't like him. I read Winnie the Pooh and like Little Bear, but I also grew up with like my mom and all of her brothers and sisters and my grandparents. So I was in a house with like 7 adults. I was the only kid, and a lot of them were English majors, so they would literally just like read me like Shakespeare, like stuff like that. And I was like, oh, okay, like, and like Sylvia Plath, like, why are you reading that to a child? I don't know if
I think
that
Sylvia
actually
Plath should have a warning. You must be 21 before
to
you
read.
crack
No,
open
the
this
one
book.
there's the one sweet poem about the baby. Yeah, but
But I mean, to this day, I read Dr. Seuss. I really like Dr. Seuss.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the few poems I've written that were comedic, I just stole the structure completely from Dr. Seuss. Right? I mean, they were just parodies of Dr. Seuss. But I think my point I wanted to make was that I think reading Dr. Seuss as a child makes you think of things poetically, because it's not really simple writing like a lot of children's literature is. He puts it into poetic sense, so that a child reading that book gets the musicality of the language.
Yes.
But apparently you hated this, so you've completely demolished
I'm
the
sorry.
point I was going to make.
I think I didn't like maybe the artwork. I was kind of like an artwork snob also as a kid.
So you thought that was too like disturbing?
I just didn't like that style. Yeah, like because I really liked. There's a book called Where the Wind Blows or Where the Wind Stops, maybe, and I was really, really drawn to the pictures and the style. It was very like kind of almost Frida Kahlo-y, like this abstract, like really cool stuff. And I liked books that had stuff like that. So it was probably like an artwork thing, like the texture of the artwork I didn't like. But I think I was also just like, this is stupid. Like, I don't know.
So I don't think there's anything that we both like or both dislike.
No,
I think we're
both
just on different planets. Did you read Shel Silverstein?
Oh, I did.
Poems?
Yeah, I did like Shel Silverstein. But I was... Oh, did you not like
I
him?
did.
No, I did.
I didn't read them as a child, but I read them to my children when they were children.
Yeah,
and I really liked it. I loved the comedic aspects of them.
Yes. Wait, he also has The Giving Tree, which was a beautiful, sad book. And I thought he was so funny, and I liked the one about, like, the gypsies stealing the baby. Like, my mom would, like, threaten me with that. Like, if I was bad, the gypsies were going to come and steal me. And the picture was so scary and disturbing, and I was very afraid of this, actually.
See, we
But,
like the one
yeah,
where he
he's
wraps
funny.
himself in toilet paper.
Oh.
That was the one we quoted all the time.
Yeah, or the
The
one where
comedic ones were the ones we liked.
the one where the kid is staying home from school and then he realizes it's Saturday.
Oh.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
saying he's sick and he's going through all of his ailments and then he's like, "What? It's Saturday? Oh, goodbye. I'm
Yeah.
out to play." And
But
it's
I
fun.
to me
Yeah.
that the comedy spoke to that. And I like the. I thought it was important for my children to read poetry because I thought it improves your language.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
And something like that is accessible and still, like, it would be great, as you said, like if you read Shakespeare, but it's highly inaccessible to most people, I think. I mean, you can't read Shakespeare to most 7-year-olds and have them say,
Yeah.
"Wow, that was great."
No, I didn't really know
Right.
what was going on. I think they were just reading it because they like had a paper due or something.
Oh.
But they did. Oh, you know what? Wait, I did like Narnia. Do you like Narnia?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very into that. But also, my uncle would read me parts of Narnia, and then he would get tired of reading, so he would just make up stuff. So to this day, there's parts of Narnia that I think happened that I'll
That
like
really
explain to
didn't
people. Yeah, they're like, "What are you talking about?" And he made up this whole scene where the kids like turned into hamsters. Like that did not happen
No.
at all. So,
But Narnia is, I mean,
He's wild.
chock full of Christian theology. It's
well, yeah,
every page is filled with it.
he's the most Christian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very Christian. I mean, his other writing I always really like the Screw Tape Letters, things like
Oh
this.
yeah, his nonfiction.
Right.
And Mere Christianity.
Yeah.
And
Have you read the Screw Tape Letters or not? Is that not something that people read anymore?
no, people read that. I think I read part of it. I don't know if I read the whole thing, but they're all like to the uncle Screw Tape.
Yeah.
From the I definitely read parts of them.
So it's one devil telling another devil how to act as a devil. And it's really fascinating. And I think I've read it several times. I read it like every 5 years.
Yeah.
And every time I read it, I find more in it.
Yeah.
Like I think when I was 20 and read it, I was too stupid to gain most of the things. I gained a little. Maybe not to say that I've gained in intelligence because I probably haven't. But I think the older you get, maybe the more you see in the book.
Yeah.
All
right. I'll reread it. How about, do you like Gertrude Stein?
I don't think I've ever read enough of her to be a judge.
Okay. So I was just going to kind of circle back around also to the thing when we were talking about the meaning versus like the textures of the words. And so I think she's somebody who's very, like some of her poetry is just abstract or kind of nonsense, but the way that she works with sounds is so cool and beautiful. And so I think for a while that was most of my poetry. Like I didn't really have anything to say, so it was very sound driven. And
So it was all form and no substance. Or something.
Right, yeah. I really think, especially when I was younger, it was a lot of, I was so drawn to the words and to the sounds. And so now I'm trying to, this book, I think maybe I didn't pay as much attention to the sounds as I have before. So now I'm trying to marry all of the things together. But
Did you do all of
Yeah.
the artwork in the book too?
oh yeah, I did.
So, I mean,
was-
again, this is a podcast and not visual,
Oh.
but there's also on almost every page some sort of picture, some sort of something
Yeah.
that ties the poem into the artwork. It all works hand in hand and together with the titles and everything else. So, I mean, it's visually the book is very appealing.
Oh, thank
Right.
you.
I mean, you don't want to say
I
yes.
tried.
But no, I think the book has an enormous visual aspect, not simply a poetic aspect.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just like you would find in a poetry anthology with, here's a poem, here's a poem, here's a poem. The
Right.
poems flow into each other. The poem flows to art, the art flows to the next poem, which makes it really delightful to read.
Oh, thank you, Steven.
All right, so should we try another?
Very nice.
Should we try another poem here?
You don't have to. We can if you would like. We could
How
just
about-
keep talking about books.
How about read this one?
Oh gosh, okay. China doll plant. How do you sort between the suitors and what's real when God lives in every lily? And well, there's a picture. I mean, the point of
So explain the
this poem was the picture. Well, it's a woman and she's a pregnant woman and she has a tea set on her belly and she's serving tea and she has a Chinese tattoo on her arm and I'm pretty sure it says food machine, but I can't really read the words right now because they're too small. And then she also has a flower in her throat. So all throughout the book, I drew a lot of people with flowers in their throat. That was like a motif, like an image for just God. I don't know why, but it felt right. So.
But I think
Yeah.
both the flower and the pregnancy is both life-giving, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
right? It's definitely that same aspect of creation,
Yes.
right? That I think permeates the book,
Oh, thank you.
right?
Yes.
You're the author. I mean,
Yeah.
you tell me.
No, yeah, for sure.
Ah.
I wanted it to be very full of life and abundantly happy.
Yeah, I think that's a good word for it. There's a lot of the abundance, right? So it's flowers and food and tea and like your. In other words, it's encouraging you to experience the totality of life,
Yeah.
right? Right, in the other people and in the pleasures of the world, right?
Right.
I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean
No,
in
in
a
a
positive
good
way,
way,
in
yeah.
a very positive. To enjoy the flowers and the trees and all that the world has to offer.
Yes.
Right.
As full of God.
Yeah.
Right, as a means of connecting to God. You don't have to get rid of the world to connect to
Yeah,
God.
exactly
You
right.
shouldn't
Which I
cast
think
off the
that's
world.
the most Catholic thing about the idea, right? Is that
Yeah.
you don't cast off. Many religions will try to get you to relinquish the world to get closer to God. Where the
Yes.
Catholicism says, as my favorite phrase, the smells and the bells.
Yeah.
No, I mean your senses are there for a reason. This is connecting you to God, not separating you from God. If it's
Right.
used in the right way.
Right.
Right. If you're using your eyes to look on violence, if violence is, then that's drawing you away from God, right? If that's what you like to see is violence, that's going to make you farther and farther away, and farther away from communicating with people, right?
Oh, right.
So I mean, if you're looking at something beautiful, and that draws you to God, but if you want to see people being beat up, right, which for some reason is very popular in our culture, violence permeates the visual arts, then that I think can draw you away from God. Right.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who wants to just see people being killed, right? I mean that's 90% of the movies that are out there, right? It's
Yeah.
I find it disturbing how many movies, if you look at the one picture that you would get on Netflix or Amazon, how many that have somebody with a gun, like that's the
on the
draw
main
in,
picture,
you know.
yeah. Well, that's
main
like the
picture.
whole action genre,
Yeah.
I think, which is just
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that whole thing is kind of just like a male ego fantasy. I don't know.
I mean,
Not really
I don't
into
dislike
that.
action movies. I like a lot of action movies, but
Yeah.
they're only good if there's a good story. When the
Right.
story is bad, the action becomes silly and dumb.
Well, right.
Right? It's the story. The really great action movies were something where the story was compelling you.
Right. Like, did you ever see John Wick?
I didn't.
Oh, well, that story is very compelling.
Really?
No, it's very sad, actually. The beginning is very sad. And then it's the one action. Like, my husband really likes action movies, too. And so that was the one. I was, like, crying in the first 10 minutes. I was like, what is happening? And then...
But that's what makes it a better movie. If you
yeah.
get actually the story is something of interest.
Right, if you're
Right.
connected.
If it's just a bunch of, like I would complain to my son who liked these kind of movies, that it was just like watching somebody play a video game. There was no story. It was just, nonstop crashing and burning, and
Yeah.
it doesn't engage your senses. It doesn't, you walk out of the movie, 10 seconds later you stop thinking about it.
Right.
Right.
There is something... Okay, so Jason, this my husband, he's from China, and he loves these, like, Chinese kung fu movies. And they're almost like parodies of action movies.
I've watched a lot of them.
Right? Okay, yeah, they're
Growing
so...
up, sure.
They're so over the top, and they're so wild, and they're so... Like, the kung fu is, like... I guess it's kind of the equivalent of superhero movies in America, because it's these people, they're, like, doing kung fu, but they're actually, like, flying
Yeah,
between
it's
buildings.
completely unrealistic.
They're doing crazy
yeah.
stuff. And I think that there's something about the stunts and just the funniness of it that's appealing. But it's also, it's funny, and they're usually very low gore. People aren't...
Yeah.
Well, and, yeah.
Well, that's how Jackie Chan made a name for himself, is that he saw the comedy in this.
Well,
And
yeah.
so he made these, he was parodying it. So he was still very good at the action,
Yeah.
but he could see the comedy in this, right?
Right.
So he saw it in a completely different way, which made it new and inventive.
Yeah. Well, new to America.
Yeah.
There's a
Oh,
whole...
yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so many in China. Like, a lot of them are in Chinese, too, but you don't really need to understand the dialogue.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Because
The
they're
dialogue is not important.
just doing kung fu.
And we watched a lot of those as kids. They
So,
were all over the
Yeah.
place.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. I didn't know that.
I mean, everybody I think of my generation did that.
Did that, yeah.
Did that.
Interesting. Oh, no.
Let's see.
I was trying to hold the book so he didn't have me read it.
But I love the phrase
took it
there.
back. Oh,
Which one was that? Where God is in every lily.
oh,
I
yeah.
think that's an excellent line.
Thank you. That is...
That's very ecclesiastical too, right? I mean,
God being and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also just like specifically too, because flowers are these very temporal things, and they pass away and they're gone. But
All right, how about let's do this one. This is
oh, okay.
Can you explain the picture in the center first?
Okay, so
the poem is separated by a picture.
The poem is separated by a picture. So I'll tell you when I get to the picture, and in the middle, it's in orange. Yeah, right. Yeah.
You drew
like
it.
a cut. It's in like a cut.
It's half an orange, the way we look at it as you're
orange.
having it for breakfast, just like you sliced it.
Yeah. So and you're seeing all of the triangles coming into the like circle-y thing in the center that kind of looks like a star or like the birth of the universe. No, I'm kidding. That was so pretentious. It's intended to be in orange.
You're an author. You could be pretentious.
No. So, okay. I did talk about James Joyce. It's a little, no, I'm kidding. Okay. So here's the poem. It's called Pentos. Stop limiting your miracles to the impossible. Then you have the picture. Every possible thing incarnate is the miracle and the proof. Oh, I forgot I wrote that. That's nice.
Is it a nice poem?
There you go. Yeah.
I like that. I mean, the phrase "every possible thing incarnate" is, and then, so again, this is visual. In standard text, it says "every possible thing incarnate is," and then it's switched to italics: the miracle and the proof.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's a very well written line, very, and also very deep. Right.
Yeah.
What were you thinking when you wrote this?
I was thinking you would like it because it has proof, which is mathematical. No, I think that, right, because I think that the incarnation is the actual miracle. So, I mean, if you just, like, think about it, so everything is nothing. It starts as nothing, and then everything comes into being, and so that is, like, the miracle of coming into being, and creation and creativity, so, like, cosmically, and people coming into being, like being born, and then also like art coming into being born, all of that is the miracle. But then the actual incarnation is the miracle, but then you're getting the physical thing, so that is also,
Well, that's the major theme of the book. I mean, there's so many pregnant women and life-giving things throughout the entire book.
Yeah.
Right.
It was fun.
And this one is just a short line, but I like it. Your body is proof that God loves you and is you.
Oh yeah, that's like the same as
Yeah.
the other one. Yeah.
But I liked, I don't know if you've seen the movie Jojo Rabbit.
Was that by that New Zealand director?
Yeah.
Did he do that?
Yeah.
No, but I want to watch it because I like him a lot.
But there was a line in it where the mother character says to the son, we dance to let God know that we're grateful to be alive. So this was sort of a theme throughout the movie, right? Because they're in Nazi Germany. It's terrible. Everything, it's just, they're in a horrible situation.
Yeah.
But her idea is, that's why you dance, to let God know that you're happy to be alive, right? So that it's, in your poem, you're basically saying, well, I'm not going to say what you're saying, but you're the author.
I don't know what I'm saying.
But it's reminiscent of that idea, right? You're grateful, your body. You're lucky to be alive. You're lucky to have an incarnation of yourself, right? You're lucky to exist.
Yeah.
Right. Not lucky. Yeah. Blessed is the right word.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just happenstance. This is a blessing unto you to be alive.
Exist.
To exist. To have your own thoughts. To communicate to other people.
Right. To be like an incarnate being.
Yeah.
In the world. Yeah. And that you don't have to cast off your body. Like, you can find so much in the incarnation. Like, that's the point, I think.
Yeah, you don't have to cast off your body.
Right. Because it's like, why would you enter into the world and become incarnate and temporal and like a world that has, suffering and death and all this stuff if you weren't supposed to enjoy the incarnation for a little while.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
well, yeah, there's, I think that's the Catholicism.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
That's what I was trying.
You're supposed to, that art is beautiful, right? I mean,
yeah.
Poetry and literature and music, and I mean, if the Catholic Church has done one great artistic thing for the world, I think it has to be music, right? I mean, music developed in the heart of the church, Western music, because it was so much part of the liturgy, singing and music and instruments, everything really, really developed inside the Catholic Church. Same thing, I guess you could say, for art, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, half of art has been a religious art or religious inspired art, so that they embrace that. Where many religions would say, no to art. You can't depict these things, and no to music, right? You can't. Music is dangerous,
Right.
right? But Catholicism would know embraces it. It embraces the poetic, the beauty, because being incarnate is something good, right? Because it has to be good because God did it, right? I mean, God Himself became incarnate, so why would you think He would do something that was bad, right?
Right. And why would He make the world?
Yeah.
I guess if it was bad, that is interesting. That is a very. I guess I didn't even think of that as such a specifically Catholic idea, but I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because even other Christians have rejected it. There was many strains in Protestantism that rejected a lot of the world.
Like this, what is that? Aesthetics.
Yeah.
Aesthetics.
And I mean,
not aesthetics. That's art.
even I think you would say the Calvinists and things like that, or like if you look at, say, the Amish, the Mennonites, their traditions, right? Well, there's much to admire about them. That they really reject the world, right? They reject anything, They're not going to make a beautiful painting, right? They think that's they won't even wear nice looking clothes, right? They want to be humble, and there's something to be humble, but I think that they go too far in saying they're just going to reject the outside world, reject the world, reject literature and art and everything else, and just focus on that. I mean. They have their position and everything, but it's definitely not a Catholic position. Right? It's not an embrace the way we view the world.
Yes.
We view it in two different ways, and even though both of our bases are the New Testament, they view it in two completely different ways.
Right. Isn't that so wild? Yeah. The multiplicity of meaning.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but and I think even with like Buddhism or the Transcendentalists, where you're trying to transcend the material world, like even if you're not necessarily saying the material world is bad, but the idea that the ultimate thing you can do is transcend it, I think is a different form than Catholicism, which is very much like get in there, like get in the world and be in and of the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think it's inviting you to transform the world.
Right. Oh yeah, creation.
Yeah.
Discovery.
Here's the passion flower. So there's two poems here, the one on page 180 and 181. I want you to read both of them.
Okay.
And there's pictures on both, so explain both of these pages.
Okay.
But do the first one and then the second.
Okay. Oh, it's all one poem.
Yeah.
Basically.
But I'm saying the 2 pages explain both of the things. Because the one long poem, but there's a poem, then there's a picture, then the rest of the poem. Then there's text and a picture.
Okay.
Right.
So on the first page, well, this picture is intended to kind of be able to look like 2 different things. So it's one of those it's an Advent wreath, or also one of those wreaths that you wear on Christmas, where like in Sweden maybe. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. You wear that for St. Lucia Day, you wear the wreath on your head and the candles, so there's lit candles. So if you look at it in one way, it looks like that, and if you look at it in a different way, it's kind of intended to look like saints with halos on them. So the candles look like these kind of abstract people. They're saints with kind of downturned heads and halos standing in a garden. So the wreath would turn into a garden. And then, so that's the first picture. And then the second picture is hands holding a candle, and it's very dark and scribbly, and it's kind of meant to have like cavey vibes. It's not meant to look exactly like hands. So both of these are kind of tricky pictures that are not very precise intentionally to look like multiple things.
Okay, so read the poem.
Can I read? Yeah. So this is the poem. Passion Flower. Jesus loves the people who put him up and the people who took him down. Jesus loved Paul when Paul was Saul. The light of the candles is one, though the candles are many. All the candles burning eternal in the same freaking love. Yeah.
It's a very nice poem.
Thank you.
And that's oozing with Catholicism. Right?
Well, yeah, that's the Jesus poem. I knew you were going to make me read this one, actually. I was going through the book yesterday. I was like, he's going to pick that out and have me do that. But
I think there's, as far as Catholic philosophy, that statement, though, there's many candles and one light, is as poetic a way to describe Catholic philosophy as you possibly can, right? I mean,
the one and the many, the
Yeah.
hen penta,
yeah,
the
exactly.
gathering.
That's right.
Yeah. The one, like the God in all of the many multiplicity of,
Yeah.
of things.
So I mean, it's there. You're looking at the communion of saints, right? The body of Christ, right? I mean, there's one body of Christ, but all the people in it, right? There's still the candles are still individuals, but the light is just one,
Yes.
right? So it's very, very deep and philosophical. But I love how the beginning one,
Oh, the beginning one.
Jesus saying, Jesus loved the people who took him down and put him up,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, probably unique to Christianity is this idea that someone would forgive someone who is killing them.
And love them.
And love them.
Extend
Yeah.
beyond forgiveness and love. Wait, I think that's such a radical idea. I think that's my favorite thing about Christianity. Well, I used to love Mary, and Mary was my main thing. And I mean, obviously I love Mary, but I think that the idea of love for everybody and love for your enemies, I think is really radical. Genuinely. And I think that it gets so, I think it turns into this thing that's kind of watered down. And I think people say it so much that it kind of turns into a cliche, and you don't really think about how radical that is. But it's like, and also we don't go around necessarily now saying oh, you're my enemy. I mean, people don't always talk like that, but it's the people who hurt you and the people who cause you pain, and also the people that you cause pain to, a lot of the time unintentionally. And I think a lot of the time, people when they hurt you, it's often unintentional. But the fact that Jesus loves all the people that hurt you is very radical. And then the idea that he loves you so much, even though you're hurting other people who he loves just that much. That's just, it's a really beautiful thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, to love the person who's putting nails through your arms is very difficult, right?
Right.
I think if from my own personal view, if that was happening to me, I would find it difficult to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah.
To think of this person, to look at this person and say, I wish the best for them.
Right.
Right. I want them to come to heaven and join with me. Right. Where they're poking your hands with nails, I probably would not be thinking that.
Right.
Right. But Jesus is.
Right.
Right. I mean, I think that would not have been in any of the religions of the day, right? That was not a common religious theme.
Right.
It was if you do something wrong to God, God is going to punish you.
Right. Yeah.
I mean that God, so you better watch out, or God is going to make your life a misery.
Yeah.
And Christianity really reversed that. That God is God's on your side no matter what.
Right.
Right. Which is a very uniquely Christian thing.
Yeah. And very beautiful.
Yeah.
Getting out of that eye for eye,
Yeah.
mentality, and just extending love. And just how radical in the context that it came out of, right? How radical. No one else was saying that at all. Saying, God is going to be mad if you're bad, and so to just totally subvert that.
Yeah, I think the eye for the eye is
so
the perfect
beautiful.
example, because many people don't understand the eye for the eye, in that this was a call for justice. In other words, if you poke out my eye, I can't kill you and your whole family.
Right.
By saying an eye for an eye was saying you can't take more than has been taken from you. It was supposed to be about justice, not that demanding that you go and take whatever was taken from you.
Right.
But Christ says, okay, that might be a question of justice, but it's not going to make anything better, right? You don't. You should not take the eye for the eye. You shouldn't do that. It's not going to help. It's so don't just seek a fairness of saying, well, you took out my eye, so I take out yours. How do we go back and actually love each other? So it's a much more radical idea, right? That's kind of, I think that's the tremendous uniqueness of Christian theology compared to what would have been theology of any other religion, in my mind.
No, yeah, the subversion of love over justice. I didn't even think of that until just now, but no, you're totally right. And because that would have been the idea. That is very beautiful. I think there's this woman, do you know Sister Progine? She was here a little while ago.
Yeah.
She wrote the Dead Man Walking book. So when she was here, we were talking to her. I think that she really exemplified that idea, because the people, so she wrote a book about people who are on death row, and she wrote one about people wrongly accused, but when she was here, it was her book about people the guy was accused rightly. He did do this horrible thing. I think he murdered teenagers in the woods. It was really horrible, and it was really awful. And I think that the thing that she said. So I was talking to her when she was here, and I was talking to her about art, and I was like, your book was actually really beautiful, and it wasn't didactic at all. Like, how did you do that? Like, it wasn't preachy in any way, even though she had this moral point that she was trying to make, was that everybody, deserves love and respect, but it wasn't didactic. And she said the most important thing is you have to really present both sides of the story. And then I did notice that in her book, she doesn't shy away from the pain of the families who lost their kids and stuff. And she did go to visit with them, and she did also like pray and ache for them. But her point was that it's not going to make your life better to kill this guy.
Yeah.
Does that like, do you know what I'm saying? So, and just extending love and compassion over justice. Not saying that what he did was right in any way at all, and also not minimizing the pain that he caused, because he caused a significant amount of pain, but then providing an alternate antidote. And I mean, I don't mean this to be like a political statement on the like death penalty or anything, but just her, the way that she looked at the world. That's my main point with that. I thought was really interesting.
A triumph of love over justice, just strict justice, right? I mean,
right.
You might claim that so killing this person might be just, right? But is it really what we want to do?
Right.
Many families will say they don't want the person killed, right? Because they don't think it's going to do anything.
Well, right, yeah.
Right. It's just vengeance at this point. They're going to say he should be locked up because you can't let him do this again.
Right, right.
Right. There's something that's causing him to do this really, really terrible thing, right? So you have to make sure he doesn't do this again.
Right.
But does murder, just killing him, make any difference, right?
Right.
I mean, for most societies in the world, they would have said, no, you do that, right? Most societies, most philosophies, most religions. But Christianity is different in that sense, right? In some sense, it's a very hard religion, right? Because you're called to much, much higher things, right? I mean, you can't just be concerned with yourself.
Right.
You have to be concerned with the other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's oozing out of your excellent poetry book.
Thank you.
So I'll ask one last question.
Okay.
So for people who want to purchase this book and own it for themselves, how would they go about finding it?
It's on Amazon, and it's
And it's called The Little
Amazon.
Book of Blooms by Lizzy Polishan.
Yes.
Right? And it has your lovely picture on the back and your lovely artwork on the front.
Yeah.
Filled with flowers.
It's full of flowers. It's very happy.
And let me ask you this, since the book is dedicated to your mother, you don't have to answer this though, but how did your mother react to the book?
Oh, she really liked it. She was crying. She was really happy. And then I was like, I don't have to do the dishes tonight, right? Because I wrote you a book. And she was like, not the point. No, but so I mean.
So all of that deep Christian thought, you were just using it as a dodge to get out of doing it.
No. But she, well,
You brought us crashing back to earth.
Basically. No, I always wanted to do like some writing thing for her. I mean, because, well, like I said, she is an artist, and she had to give up a lot of that she had me very young when she was in college, and so I was like, look, like, it's not all in vain, because I can create stuff, and you created me, and that's kind of cool. But I mean, yeah. So I think, but no, I mean, she's very supportive of me and everything, so I could write a terrible book and she would still love it, I think.
But even as you said, your love of Mary in this book indicates your motherhood is a very common thought in your head, right? I mean, you're thinking about motherhood all the time.
Yeah. I don't really like taking care of kids, though. It's interesting. Like small children, because it's hard work.
Yeah.
They're kind of gross and sticky, but.
I mean, to me, the most difficult thing about small children is it's frightening. Because you think this person's life, every aspect of life is dependent upon you.
No, seriously,
it can be a very daunting idea.
Terrifying.
Right?
Yeah.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying.
No, I don't even like watching people's cats because I get scared. Like, what if it runs out in the street and then, you have to live with that then? So a kid is even more than a cat.
Yeah. I remember when taking home my first son, and I'm thinking, they just said, okay, here's the kid, goodbye. And
you could have been a stranger.
I said, but I'm thinking they wouldn't let me take a washing machine home without like giving me a little demonstration of what to do. They're just saying nothing, right?
In the hospital. But I thought you meant like from school. No, yeah.
right? To take him home from the hospital, I'm thinking, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right, then we get home, now what do we do, right? So those first few days were just very daunting,
Yeah.
right? And I was a nervous wreck. Not everybody is a nervous wreck, but I was a nervous wreck.
Yeah. No, I would be a nervous wreck.
Oh.
I think for sure.
But still, I think the notion of motherhood is it's mostly about creation, right? It's the giving of yourself to another,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, a mother takes what's hers and gives it to another person. It's I mean, people say in a derogatory way that you think that the best thing a woman could do is give birth or something, that, you know, when they say it in a negative way. And I think that's true. I think that's the best thing any person on earth could do, right? There's absolutely nothing better in the entire world than to give life to another human being.
Yeah.
Right? So only a mother can do this. It's like a superpower.
Right. No,
right? So
exactly.
I mean, to say, wow, is that the best thing? Sure. What could be is making a lot of money better, or, you know,
Yeah.
scoring a touchdown? No, all those things pale in comparison to giving life, right? It's
Exactly.
the act of creation.
Why do you think men wrote so many books for so long? So they couldn't have kids. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, no.
No, I've
agree. I
heard
think it's
people
wild.
say that they think that that's the why men do a lot of things is because because they can't give birth, because they can't create.
Yeah.
And so they create in other ways, because they're just, they feel like second class because they can't. Not second class. That sounds like politics. I mean, it's like you're lacking the superpower somebody else has, right? And you look
Right.
at that and are almost a jealousy of that,
Right.
right? So you find other ways to create.
Yes. It's like the reverse of the Freudian thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It's maternal envy.
Right, yeah. Basically. Yeah. Interesting.
Excellent. Well, it's been
Well,
excellent to talk to you.
it was so
Thank you
nice
very
to talk
much
to you, too.
for your coming to our podcast.
Thank you, Stephen, for having me. Goodbye, everyone. Is it over?